can't wait to see my new salary, I said into the hush of the glass-walled room. My boss laughed. New salary? We gave it to Lucas. HR slid a folder across the table. My name wasn't on the list. Lucas grinned, tapping the table with a pen. Guess I forgot to mention it. My name is Kira Vale. I'm 28. If people can rewrite your worth with a laugh, what story do you write back, quiet or carved in steel? The fluorescent lights hummed like insects. My coffee had cooled into a thin brown mirror I didn't want to look into. The chair beside me looked like it was waiting for me to sit, patient, complicit, obedient. I stayed standing. Somewhere down the hall, a printer coughed out paper like it was spitting bones. Budget constraints, HR said, not looking up. Performance alignment, my boss added, smoothing his tie. Dialogue decoy 1. Kira, you're such a team player, someone from marketing sing-songed as they drifted past the open door. Dialogue decoy 2. From the hallway, a whisper. She'll be fine. She always bounces. On the conference table sat a small silver paperclip I'd twisted into a crooked oval during weeks of late nights. I looped it into the chain I'd been building inside my pocket, a quiet habit, one link for every time I swallowed a no. The metal felt cool, almost kind. The chain pressed against my palm like a promise. Clear out your desk today, the boss said, almost gently, as if mercy could be stapled to a sentence. Of course, I replied, and watched him mistake my stillness for surrender. At my desk, the plant leaned toward the window like it wanted a different office. I boxed the framed photo of the river, the cracked compact mirror that made 2 versions of my mouth, the mug that said good things take time. I left the mint tin. It always tasted like chalk. When I shut the drawer, the paperclip chain pooled in my hand, bright as a thin blade. In the glass of my monitor, I saw their reflections, blurred figures who thought I'd been erased. But the blank space they made for me wasn't empty. It was a page. And a page, I've learned, can be sharper than any knife. I carried the cardboard box through the hallway, its weight lighter than the silence following me. My coworkers glanced up, then back down, as if eye contact might stain them with my failure. The air smelled faintly of burnt coffee and toner. But beneath it, I swore I could smell something sour, betrayal. Lucas leaned in his chair, legs crossed, smiling as if my humiliation were entertainment. Tough break, Kira, he said, pretending sympathy. Don't worry, I'll buy you lunch sometime on my new salary. His laugh cracked like cheap glass. I didn't answer. Instead, I set the box on the edge of my desk and opened my laptop one final time. Fingers moving in steady rhythm, I logged into the shared database. They thought firing me, or rather, erasing me, meant I'd walk away empty. But years of late nights had left me with knowledge they didn't realize I carried, tucked between numbers and contracts. The paperclip chain sat in my palm as I worked, each link a cool reminder of silence endured. It jingled softly, like a secret bell only I could hear. The surreal detail, for a second it sounded like applause. I downloaded files, encrypted evidence of misreported accounts, expense reports that Lucas had signed without reading, and notes showing how my boss had quietly approved them. The truth hid in plain sight, buried in the spreadsheets everyone else ignored. I slid the flash drive into my pocket just as HR walked by. She nodded curtly, already on to her next task. They'd erased me from the list, but they hadn't erased me from the system. When I shut the laptop, Lucas called after me. Good luck out there, Vale. Some people just aren't promotion material. I paused, looked back once. The office lights flickered above him, throwing his grin into shadow. Inside, my silence curved into something sharper, a promise waiting to be unveiled. The evening air hit me like a release. Cool, damp, smelling faintly of rain and exhaust. I walked past the revolving doors with my box clutched against my chest, each step echoing louder than it should have. Outside, the city hummed indifferently, neon signs flickering, a bus hissing at the curb. My reflection in the glass facade lingered a moment behind me, a woman dismissed, framed in steel and glass. But reflections lie. I was already rewriting mine. Back in my apartment, I set the box down and opened the window. The paperclip chain spilled onto the desk with a metallic sigh. It had grown longer than I realized, dozens of tiny links twisted together like fragile armor. I draped it across the lamp. The light turned it into a thin silver scar, cutting through the room. I plugged in the flash drive. Files opened like wounds. Invoices, falsified receipts, signed approvals. Lucas had buried the truth under jargon, but I knew the rhythm of his shortcuts, the way he covered laziness with charm. My boss had been complicit, calling it efficiency. The surreal moment. I imagined the spreadsheets breathing, columns expanding like lungs, exhaling truths no one wanted to hear. I printed a few key pages and slid them into a black folder. My hands shook, not from fear, but clarity. They wanted me gone, erased like a typo. Instead, I was becoming the red ink no one could scrub away. A notification blinked on my phone, an invite from a recruiter I'd once ignored. Timing, it seemed, had its own poetry. I lay back, staring at the paperclip chain, the lamp's glow making it shimmer like a fuse waiting to be lit. Outside, thunder rolled low, like the city whispering in approval. Tomorrow, I thought, would not be theirs. It would be mine. Tomorrow, I thought, would not be theirs. It would be mine. I slept like someone who finally stopped holding their breath. Morning came slow and green through the blinds. The paperclip chain lay across my nightstand like a quiet promise. I looped it around my wrist, an odd bracelet that felt more like armor, and dressed in the clothes of someone who still needed to keep a respectable face for the world. The city outside was already a drum. Footsteps, a siren, the distant clack of heels that had once belonged to me. My plan was simple and surgical. Not a scream in the hallway, not a viral video, not a public meltdown. I'm not a pyrotechnic woman. I am arithmetic and silence. If you want to bring down a room full of liars, you remove the floor beneath their numbers. I brewed coffee that tasted like paper and decision. Then I called an old contact, an external auditor I'd helped months ago on an innocuous reconciliation. He remembered my name, remembered the quiet way I'd caught a mismatch then. He didn't know I'd been erased, only that I was calling with a tremor he could hear. There's something in the corporate filings, I said. Not a mistake, a pattern. Can you look? He agreed with the kind of curiosity that opens doors. I mailed the black folder to an address that wasn't the office's address. I sent a sealed envelope to the chair of the board with a single typed line inside. You deserve to know what your ledgers hide. No return name, no fanfare, just evidence and a trail. Dialogue decoy, a neighbor knocked, raising her voice about lost parcels. People steal boxes these days. My heart thudded like a guilty animal. The paperclip rasped against my wrist. Before leaving, I copied one last file to the cloud and scheduled a message to go to the company's legal inbox the next morning. My finger hovered over send. Outside, thunder gathered, thick as judgment. I hit send, and in the next breath, my phone buzzed. An unknown number, one word in the preview. Kira. Kira. The voice on the other end was low, measured, almost careful. This is she, I replied, steadying my breath. This is Malcolm Rowe, outside counsel for the board. We received materials. Unusual, thorough materials. His paws stretched like wire. Can we meet? I agreed. Not at the office, never there again. We chose a cafe with scratched wooden tables and a humming espresso machine that smelled like burnt almonds. Malcolm arrived in a navy suit, eyes sharp behind his glasses. He slid the black folder from his briefcase, the same one I had mailed anonymously. You're the source. Not a question, a statement. I nodded. You asked for truth. That's all I brought. He flipped pages slowly, his finger tapping when numbers sang too loud. These approvals, the patterns, this is not minor negligence. This is fraud, possibly embezzlement. He glanced up. You understand what this means. The paperclip chain pressed into my wrist under the sleeve of my blouse. I understand, I said, though part of me wondered if he could hear the applause in its faint metallic chime. Your company will implode if this is true. His voice softened. And you'll be the match that lit it. I thought of Lucas's grin, the boss's polished tie, the HR woman's blank eyes. I thought of being erased from a list, as though I had never mattered. The match, I murmured, was struck the day they decided silence was cheaper than fairness. He studied me as though weighing the cost of belief. Then he said, the board meets Friday. I want you there. Not as staff. He leaned closer, lowering his tone. As witness. I walked out into rain, my blouse damp at the shoulders, the city alive with static. My reflection in the cafe window no longer looked erased. It looked like it was waiting, and waiting I knew was nearly over. Friday arrived dressed in gray. The sky sagged with clouds, the kind that swallow sound, leaving only the echo of your own footsteps. I clutched the paperclip chain in my pocket, the links cool and certain, as I walked into the marble lobby of a building I had never entered before, the board's headquarters. The receptionist glanced up, clearly not expecting someone like me. Meeting, she asked. Witness, I said simply, sliding the letter Malcolm had sent across the desk. Her eyes flickered, but she nodded and buzzed me in. The boardroom was nothing like my old office. Dark wood table, windows stretched high above the city, silence thick enough to make your pulse loud. Men and women in suits sat in stiff rows, their pens aligned like soldiers. At the far end, Lucas and my boss looked less polished than I remembered, ties crooked, foreheads damp. The chairwoman began. We've reviewed troubling reports. We will hear from counsel. Then the witness. Malcolm's voice was steady, deliberate. He laid out the numbers, the approvals, the signatures that weren't mistakes, but choices. Each page landed like a stone dropped into still water. My boss shifted in his seat. Lucas cracked his knuckles, though his grin had evaporated. Miss Vale, the chairwoman finally said, step forward. My legs carried me to the table's edge. The room smelled faintly of ink and old carpet. I placed the flash drive down, gently, the way you might set down a blade. I was told I wasn't promotion material, I said, voice calm but clear. But I was material enough to stay late, to fix mistakes, to cover gaps. When I asked for recognition, I was erased. So I left. But I didn't leave blind. The silence that followed felt like oxygen waiting for a spark. And in Lucas's eyes I saw the flicker of fear, small, but bright enough to light the whole room. The flicker in Lucas's eyes widened into panic as the first document projected onto the boardroom screen. Numbers glared in neat columns, but the truth was jagged. Malcolm narrated, his tone precise, slicing through excuses before they could form. This isn't clerical error, he said. This is systemic. Fraud signed, approved, and concealed. I stood beside him, not speaking, only watching. The paperclip chain lay coiled in my pocket, each link pressing like a heartbeat. My boss cleared his throat. This is an overreaction, a misunderstanding. His hand trembled slightly as he adjusted his tie, a gesture I'd once mistaken for composure. The chairwoman's gaze was unflinching. Explain why company funds were routed through shell accounts carrying Lucas's initials. Lucas snapped. Everyone does it. He stopped, realizing his slip, but the echo of his words hung heavy. I finally spoke. My voice cut quieter than his, but landed harder. Everyone doesn't. I didn't. Silence. Then a murmur rippled through the board. Dialogue decoy. One director whispered to another. How did they miss this for so long? Another muttered. She was invisible. That's how. Invisible. The word sharpened something inside me. I pressed the chain tighter until it left crescents in my palm. Malcolm placed the black folder in front of the chairwoman. The evidence is comprehensive. If ignored, it becomes complicity. The chairwoman closed the folder slowly, as though shutting a coffin. Her eyes swept the room, settling on me last. Thank you, Miss Vale. You've done what our leadership failed to. Lucas tried to laugh, brittle as glass. She's just bitter. Fired staff making noise. But his voice faltered when the chairwoman lifted a hand, silencing him with nothing more than presence. And in that hush, I realized their empire was already crumbling. All I had done was point to the crack. What came next would not just be silence. It would be judgment. Judgment arrived swiftly, not with gavel strikes or shouted verdicts, but with signatures. The board voted to suspend both my boss and Lucas, pending investigation. Their chairs sat suddenly vacant, leather still warm, as if even furniture recoiled from their weight. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Watching Lucas's grin dissolve into ash was enough. He wouldn't meet my eyes, as though I'd become the mirror he feared most. My boss tried once more to mutter about loyalty and misunderstanding, but the words curled weakly into the carpet, unheard. The chairwoman turned to me. You've given us clarity. That's rare. What do you want now? I paused, the paperclip chain coiled in my hand, links pressing into my skin like punctuation. Nothing, I said, only to leave knowing silence didn't win. Later, I walked into the same city that had swallowed me whole just days earlier. Yet everything looked altered. Traffic lights brighter, air thinner, even the rain cleaner. I unclipped the chain link by link, letting the pieces fall into the river below the bridge. The water caught them, swallowed them, carried them off, each one a fragment of swallowed injustice now set free. The surreal detail, for an instant the current shimmered silver, as if the river itself applauded. I took a job offer soon after, different industry, different skyline, a place where my name wasn't a shadow on someone else's wall. But more than a career shift, it was a reclamation of my voice, my worth, my story. Lucas and my old boss would face their reckoning in board minutes and legal filings. I didn't need to see it. Some endings don't require witnesses. Because the truest revenge isn't thunder, it's quiet clarity.